What's going on with PCs? Trying to make a budget build brand new is really annoying at the moment, or so it seems. This video was inspired by Jay's 2 cents, and his video, "The PC Industry is in Self-Destruct Mode." Link in the description for his video. It made me think about New Zealand and how my general feelings towards that PCs at the mid and bottom end are hard to build at the moment for price to performance. So, is this sentiment true for New Zealand? Let's find out. It's hard to recommend parts, especially when you're overpaying for them. One of the biggest gripes I've had is with motherboards. Motherboards used to be relatively inexpensive, and even Jay feels the same about this in his video as well. But for a while now, at least from what I think, they seem to be holding at these higher prices. Let's take an example. So first off, we've got the best budget gaming PC build for March of 2023, the most recent video I've made for a PC build advice guide. This one is an Intel build from March, and it has an MSI Pro H610M-B that at the time was $179 from Computer Lounge. At this very moment, it's $169 on special from the only supplier being First Wave. There aren't any retailers in New Zealand who sell it at the moment. So, if we're gonna look back on its price history here, its all-time low was $159 in December of 2022 for $159 from Computer Lounge. In this instance, the price has stayed around about the same for this H series motherboard, so let's try to compare it to something else. In my video of prices are down for the September of 2022 gaming PC advice build guide, I have gone with two different build paths here. So the first one was an Intel build path and the second one was an AMD build path. So for this one, I'm just going to focus on the Intel motherboard. In this build, there is a B560M-K from September 2022, which costs $164 from First Wave or Extreme PC, for an arguably better motherboard compared to the H series. The other difference here is that the B560 is an older socket compared to the H610, which is newer. What I'm trying to get at here is that the H series of motherboard is supposed to be a tier below the B series one, although arguably, the B series is around about the same price that you're paying for the H series today, but you are now paying more for a B series motherboard. In this particular example, you can even see the price history from this Asus Prime B560. If I go below here to the price history, you can see that although from another supplier it is $189.44 from Aleve, and going forward you can see that it's remained around about the same price for a little while, and it's not available in New Zealand anymore. So let's go on to another example now. So I've got here a build from June of 2022, and it's named "It's Finally Time to Build a Gaming PC." And I've got here an ASRock H610M HDV motherboard, and at that time it cost $153.81 from PB Tech, which is still a bit expensive for that time, but it's still cheaper than today. And that motherboard today would have cost you around about $171.35 from PB Tech. Now, unfortunately, they ran out of stock while I was doing the script and filming this video, but as you can see here on the price history, it was $171.35, so it had gone up in price for this particular motherboard. Let's have a look at an AMD motherboard. So from November 2022, I've got the MSI B550M, which costs $199 from First Wave, and today it also costs $199 from First Wave, again being the cheapest. So let's have a look at its price history here. So if I just scroll down and I click all, we can see that the lowest for this motherboard was $147 from First Wave Technology in 2021, October 2021. What have I noticed here? The MSI B550 board was cheaper in 2021 even when not on special. The Asus B560M was cheaper in 2022 overall. The ASRock H610M has remained relatively constant in price, although being slightly cheaper in 2022. The MSI Pro H610M-B became cheaper in 2023, and pricing has remained relatively constant. It seems like in the B series of motherboards from AMD and Intel, you are paying more compared to previously depending on the motherboard and the time frame. So yes and no, motherboard prices have gone up, but only depending on the generational series of the motherboard and the tier of the motherboard. In my case, it is true for the B series of motherboards that they do cost more than they did previously. I'm gonna throw two more curveball examples in here. So the first one is a video from October of 2021. In this instance, I had the Asus Prime H510M-E that used to be $144.99 from PB Tech. Comparing that to the newer ASRock H610 HDV motherboard, although just out of stock now, it did used to cost $171.35. So I think that is a little bit of an increase, considering that you could get an H series motherboard from back then for $144.99, and today it's $171.35. I'm going to throw another one in here. So even a build from September of 2020 was using a Ryzen based CPU with an Asus Prime B450M-A, which costs $139 from Computer Lounge. Comparing that to today's MSI B550M, which is $199 for that board. There was a time where B series motherboards used to cost below $150, but that hasn't been the case for a little while now. Whether it's an H series motherboard or if it's a B series motherboard from AMD or Intel, price increases depend on the generation, tier of motherboard, and the time frame that we are comparing. Mind you, this is all without inflation adjusted prices. Whilst inflation has gone up, if I use the inflation calculator in New Zealand for the MSI B550M Pro VDH motherboard, and I take the cheapest point of being $147 back in October 2021, if I put that figure into the calculator today, I get $164.16 in Q3 of 2023. Keep in mind this is the furthest quarter I could put currently. The inflation calculator is also provided by the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. This was the lowest price it had ever been at, and even with inflation adjusted prices, that special price of $147 was never reached even with inflation adjusted today. So it is a bit more expensive, but let's just check the other price as well just after that all-time low price finished. That was $179, and in today's money with inflation adjusted that would be $199.90, which is bang on what it costs today because it costs $199 today. So what we can tell here is that inflation is in fact eroding the value of this motherboard. At the start, I mentioned that Jay inspired this video. He mentions a good point where even with manufacturing costs rising generally, motherboards shouldn't have risen by this much. And I agree with this sentiment in terms of motherboards. Two items I have seen go down in price in New Zealand though are SSDs and RAM. They are both generally cheaper in New Zealand at the moment. There's a good graph shown by Jay, and it's for flagship GPUs and how they are increasing generally year by year for their release prices. This is not good, and it's not a good indicator for pricing for consumers, because if they launch their flagship GPUs at a higher price point, that would generally determine the pricing for other tiers of graphics cards as well. So if the flagship GPUs increase in launch price, so should the mid and low tiers as well. All companies will have to reduce their prices if demand doesn't respond to these higher prices well. While I do acknowledge that some prices for some components such as motherboards have gone up, which Jay mentioned in his video, would be one of the indicators of PC pricing at the moment, we do need to look at the overall costs. As I mentioned, SSDs and RAM are much cheaper than what they used to be. So, will it balance out? It's hard to do a comparison one-to-one for each component. The fair way to do this is to have an example that I did about a year ago for the September of 2022 PC build. And I'm going to do a very similar PC build for today and also compare the same build with inflation adjusted amounts. Here are the two builds side by side, and we're going to do a parts comparison first. So there are a few differences. In the current build, we have a Ryzen 5 5600 opposed to the Ryzen 5 3600. The motherboard is a Gigabyte B550M-K opposed to a Asus TUF Gaming A520 motherboard. The graphics card is an NO3D RTX 3060 opposed to the MSI RX 6600. The case is a Fractal Design Focus 2 opposed to the Fantex P360A. The power supply is a Silverstone DA750, 750 watt compared to the Silverstone DA650, 650 watt. And the fan is just basically a change of color, is the Inwin Series Pure ASP 120 compared to the ASL 120. Quick note on the GPU, for $20 more, you could also have got the RX 7600 for $519 from PB Tech, opposed to going to the RTX 3060, but I just wanted to keep it in a similar price bracket, so that's the reason I went for it. So let's compare the overall inflation adjusted prices. So last year we saw that the build cost $1,317.77, and this year it costs $1,392.21. This means that today's build is around about $29 cheaper, even with inflation adjusted prices and with slightly better parts. Now let's do the comparison for today's build in last year's prices. So let's have a look. So if we have the build costing $1,363 and we inflation adjust it to last year, the build would have cost $1,290.12. So that's still cheaper compared to the $1,317.77, and that is a difference of $27.65. So our build is cheaper than by $27.65 by building today with slightly better parts. So we find overall that using similar parts, or if not better parts in terms of the CPU, the PC costs almost about the same as it did last year for this particular build. It's around about a $30 difference, but it's not too much. Now that's not to say that this is objectively true as a whole, as you probably can find a build where this isn't true anymore and the price has gone up. But in this instance, it does remain true that the prices are around about the same overall for this particular PC build. Also keep in mind that I'm using 2023 Q3 inflationary data, and I also swapped out parts that weren't available anymore, like the Ryzen 5 3600 for the 5600, which is better, and you could also get an RX 7600, which is only $20 more in New Zealand, making it a better choice over the RTX 3060 than what input in today's comparison build. Keep this in mind for the low and mid end as well. So, in essence, today's build holds more value for money compared to last year's build, and is slightly cheaper by around about $27.65. Almost the same as last year, but with better parts. If you were to build this PC on the day I made this script, you would be getting better value for money. But on the other hand, motherboard prices seem to be a bit more expensive overall from the comparisons I gave earlier. This has been super interesting to go through and finding out how inflation affects PC prices in New Zealand. Just remember, it's always good not to generalize, as we can't compare everything at once. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks Jay for an awesome video idea. Check out wirestech.org for some more awesome content, but other than that, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!